What's the most significant, you just ducked with the wrong person, moment you've witnessed or experienced? When I was about 10 or so, I shot a cricket with a Nerf gun from a prone position, and it dodged it, then jumped at me, and I got up in panic so fast, the gun flung from my hand into the kitchen, breaking a few glasses. Never ducked with crickets again. This crazy guy frequented the convenience store where I used to work. He would come in and put $2 worth of fuel in his car 3 or 4 times a day, because the NS steal my gas, he'd say. If there was a black person in the store, he'd yell and swear at them, call them names, and tell them to stop following him. Well, one day he started on this short, skinny guy, who ignored him at first. Crazy guy keeps on, and skinny guy finally smirks and says something like, "Are you talking to me, brother?" At which point crazy guy, who I should add was also a large guy, turns around and pushes the guy. The little guy then proceeded to knock the crazy guy on his ass, drag him outside, and beat the living shit out of him before the cops came. Edit. For those of you wondering what happened next, both guys got arrested. I had to close a store long enough to make a statement, and a copy of the surveillance video for the police. I was the only employee on duty at the time. I never saw either one of them again. A few weeks later the crazy guy called the store to try to find out what happened to his vehicle. He was surprisingly polite and easy to deal with. Maybe getting arrested resulted in him getting some kind of help. I don't know. He never came back to the store that I know of. I was sitting at Blackjack table, and this guy was betting ridiculously for every hand. He would place his chips up, then take them down, then half up, then back down, wait bit, repeat. Every hand took an extra 30 to 40 seconds. Finally, the 5th time this happened, I asked the guy if he wouldn't mind speed things up a bit. He proceeded to get aggressive after this. He had 3 friends standing behind him. After some banter he asked me if I wanted to take this out to the parking lot. I'm 6 feet 2, 215 pounds athletic build. He and his friends were older, mostly out of shape late 30s. After the proposition, I responded, sure. What he didn't know, that my NFLD lineman best friend and twin brother were playing at the table next to mine. I stood up and said to them, "Hey, friend and brother, we have to go kick these guys' asses right now." They turned tail and shuffled quickly in the opposite direction. I work in a law office, and regularly have to go file documents with the court. I have learned, from watching one interaction, not to duck with the clerks at the filing window. A lot of people probably don't know / wouldn't believe how detailed the rules are for submitting documents to the court. There are rules regarding the type of paper you can use, the exact spacing of the heading on the paper, the exact measurements of the 2-hole punches at the top of the paper, etc. There are literally dozens of rules on how to format your filings. In my experience, these rules are rarely enforced. The clerks will reject documents if there are major errors, missing signatures, incorrectly filled out, etc. But will usually let things slide, like your 2-hole punches not being precisely 2 3/4 inches apart. But there was one day where I saw a clerk take sweet revenge against someone who totally had it coming. I was standing in line, waiting to file something, and a notoriously huge prick of an attorney got called up to the window. The clerk asked him something like, "I'm really sorry, Mr. Notoriously huge prick, but you're missing some attachment to this form." He reacted as if she had just stood from her chair, flipped him the bird, and went to shit on his mother's grave. He starts yelling about how she didn't know what the duck she was doing. A trained ape could do her job. He would be complaining to her supervisor, and on and on. He goes stomping away, and she looks much calmer than you would expect for someone who just got reamed out by this enormous douchebag. I get called up to her window and say something like, "I am so sorry you had to deal with that." She replies, "It's fine, he's on my list now." I'm curious, so I ask what she means. Her response was fantastic. She says, "Mr. Notoriously huge prick handles a lot of family law cases. He'll be wanting to file things here, and his paperwork is bound to land on my desk. For people like him, I get out the formatting sections of the rules of court, and I make sure he's followed every one of them. She points to my filing and says, "Your 2-hole punches look off. You see how one is higher than the other? They are supposed to be a certain distance from the top of the page. I'm not going to reject yours. But next time he drops something off at the filing box, you better believe I'm going to bust out my ruler." I say how awesome that is, but once he sees the reason his document was rejected, he'll just have an assistant fix it or whatever. She replies, "We don't have to tell him why it was rejected specifically, just that it violated some rule of formatting. He can figure that out for himself, if he ever wants to have another document filed." She looked so happy. When I was a senior in high school, I was at some house party. There was this chick named Rachel there, a notoriously crazy bitch who was known for causing trouble anywhere she went. She was also a pretty big girl, maybe 5'9", broad shoulders. Anyway, out of nowhere, she just starts screaming at another girl, Sarah, a shorter, skinny thing, who was seriously on the other side of the room doing absolutely nothing. Rachel gets up in her face, starts cursing her out, pushing her multiple times, obviously just trying to start shit for the hell of it. Rachel finally decides to throw a punch, and I shit you not, like a flash of light, Sarah just launches at Rachel, starts beating the living shit out of her face, knocks her on her ass, and strongholds Rachel's hair and starts slamming her skull on the brick fireplace in the house. I think she must have knocked Rachel out for a minute, because Sarah decided she was done, and just stood up and walked away. Turns out Sarah's older sister was a competitive female boxer, and showed her a thing or two about fighting. Definitely the best girl fight I've ever seen. Chatted shit to this guy on the internet once. Turned out he's some sort of high-ranking sniper in the Navy SEALs. I was working in a sketchy part of Albuquerque when I realized a guy was following me through the parking lot. Started walking faster, so did he. I knew I wasn't going to get into my car before he reached me, so I took the knife out of my purse and turned around and shoved it in his face and yelled, "I'm from Wisconsin, I can gut a deer." Dude took off, and I got in my car shaking. I lost it at a subway a while back. This story isn't about me losing it at a person myself, but I found someone who could and did. The subway I go to is inside a skating rink, and on this day it was flooded with newly pubescent boys, thinking that treating people like absolute horse shit is how you act like a macho man. One girl behind the counter was near tears, and the other woman was trying to hold her own ground against a bunch of approximately 13-year-olds. It was, "You ducking bitch, I didn't ducking ask for mayo. Are you blind? For duck's sake, that's not toasted enough. When I get a job, I'm gonna be making more than you." Just a taste of some of what I heard. So I went out to the lobby of the skating rink, found a woman nearby, and asked her if she was with the boys in subway, which she was, and then I told her to follow me. The look on the boys' faces when she let out her angered screech after listening to them was friggin' priceless. She made the boys pay for their own food. One boy didn't get to finish making his sandwich. "Wrap it up how it is, and he'll pay for it." And from what I gathered, as she practically dragged them out of there, was the boys who weren't hers. She was going to speak to their parents, followed by strong protests, as she told them to pack their crap, as she was taking them home early. I left the girls at Subway a nice tip, and they gave me a cookie. Never duck with an angry mom. My father and his brother, who are both 6'6", were riding in my uncle's tiny little Chevette, and a guy road raged and chased them into a parking lot. You could almost see the guy fill his pants when they unfolded themselves out of the car. My dad always tells me this story of how you should never get out of your car after a road rage incident. My mom and him were driving to the city when another driver didn't give my dad his right of way. I think it's called that in English, not sure. He almost crashed into my parents. My mom was pregnant at the time, so of course my dad was angry out of his mind. My dad being 1.85 meters and about 80 to 85 kilograms wasn't exactly someone to mess with, but out of the little car that almost crashed into my parents' car, got a man what my dad described as a freaking giant. Dad quickly got back in the car and kept driving. He always get embarrassed when he tells the story, because mom still laughs at the face he made when that giant got out of his tiny car.